Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to tackle this incredible story of King Hezekiah going head to head with the Assyrians.
Yeah, a story with a lot of layers to it.
Yeah, we know the story from the Bible, but today I want to dig into some of the lesser known aspects.
Absolutely, and there are quite a few.
Yeah. So let's start with Hezekiah himself, right? He's considered a righteous king, but what really makes him different from his predecessors?
Well, he was radically devoted to restoring true worship in Judah. It was almost like a spiritual reset.
Okay, spiritual reset, how so?
He completely abolished idol worship. He destroyed all these shrines and even took down the bronze serpent that Moses himself had created.
Wait, hold on. The bronze serpent, the one that healed people in the wilderness?
It's the one. It was a pretty audacious move.
Yeah, I can imagine. Why would he do that?
Well, it seems the bronze serpent had over time become almost an idol itself.
Oh, interesting. So it was no longer a symbol of God's power, but a distraction.
Exactly. Hezekiah understood the danger of letting even good intentions get in the way of true faith.
That's a really good point. So Hezekiah is shaking things up spiritually, but I bet there were some pretty serious external threats looming, weren't there?
Oh, absolutely. At that time, the Assyrian Empire was a major force to be reckoned with.
The Assyrians. Yeah, they weren't exactly known for their diplomacy.
Not at all. They were a ruthless conquering machine.
And leading this machine was King Sennacherib. What made him such a formidable enemy?
Sennacherib was driven by this relentless ambition. He wanted to not just conquer, but also completely dismantle his enemies.
And unfortunately for Judah, they were right in his path.
Exactly. And to make matters worse, Israel, Judah's northern neighbor, had already fallen to the Assyrians.
That's right. They were basically wiped off the map. That had to be terrifying for Hezekiah and the people of Judah.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine seeing the remnants of a neighboring nation, people you probably knew personally, scattered and displaced. That puts the stakes pretty high.
Yeah, no kidding. So knowing all this, how did Hezekiah initially respond to the Assyrian threat?
Well, at first he tried to play it safe. He attempted to appease Sennacherib with a massive tribute.
A tribute, like what? Bags of gold?
Oh, way more than that. We're talking huge quantities of silver and gold. He even had to strip the temple to make the payment.
Wow. Hezekiah, this incredibly devout king, stripping the very symbol of his faith to try and buy peace.
Oh.
It just shows the kind of pressure he was under.
Yeah, imagine having to choose between potentially compromising your faith and protecting your people from annihilation. That's a dilemma that's all too real throughout history.
It's a tough one. But sadly, this attempt at appeasement didn't work, did it?
Not even close. Sennacherib took the tribute and then did exactly what he planned to do anyway.
Which was?
Launch a full-scale siege on Jerusalem, the heart of Judah.
So he was going to take them down no matter what.
Seems that way. And here's where it gets really interesting. Sennacherib didn't just want a military victory, he wanted to break their spirits.
Psychological warfare.
Exactly. A brilliant but brutal strategy. He sent his envoys to the walls of Jerusalem to shout threats and insults. But here's the twist. They did it in Hebrew, the language of the common people.
He was trying to bypass the leadership and go straight to the hearts and minds of the everyday people. That's cold.
It was incredibly effective. They were spreading carefully crafted propaganda designed to sow fear and doubt among the Judeans.
Like what kind of things were they saying?
They reminded them of Israel's destruction. They mocked their God as weak and powerless. They painted Hezekiah as a foolish leader, leading them to certain death.
I see. So not just military might, but also this campaign of fear and intimidation. It was a multi-pronged attack.
Precisely. He wanted to weaken their resolve before a single arrow was fired.
Yeah, that's intense. And to make matters even worse, didn't Sennacherib offer them a deal? Almost like a devil's bargain?
Oh, he did. It sounded pretty good on the surface: surrender and live peacefully in a land just like yours. Vineyards, olive groves, the good life.
Sounds too good to be true. And knowing Sennacherib, it probably was.
Oh, absolutely. It was a classic bait-and-switch tactic. We see this all the time throughout history, these promises of quick rewards and easy solutions.
But there's always a catch.
Always a hidden cost. And history shows us just how dangerous it can be to fall for these traps.
So Hezekiah is stuck between a rock and a hard place. His attempt to buy peace failed. His city is under siege. His people are terrified, and he's facing this unstoppable force. So what does he do?
In this moment of complete desperation, Hezekiah's true character shines through. He turns to his faith.
He doesn't give in to despair or panic?
Not at all. He tears his clothes, puts on sackcloth, the traditional signs of mourning, and heads straight to the temple.
He's going to the ultimate source of strength, laying his burdens at God's feet.
Exactly. And what he does next is really striking. He takes Sennacherib's threatening letter, that document filled with arrogance and threats, and spreads it out before the Lord.
It's a powerful visual. He's basically saying, God, you see this. This is what I'm up against.
Yeah, and it's such a raw and honest moment. He's not trying to hide his fear or pretend he has it all figured out.
What I find so compelling is that he doesn't resort to political maneuvering or military strategy.
Yeah.
In that moment of crisis, his response is pure faith.
And it's in these moments of vulnerability that we truly see what our faith is made of.
It's a powerful reminder that even when we feel powerless, there's a strength we can tap into that goes beyond our own abilities.
Absolutely. It's a theme that runs throughout this story and that has resonated with people for centuries. You know, it's interesting how Hezekiah's prayer goes beyond just asking for help. He actually takes the time to acknowledge God's power. Contrast it with the powerless idols of those nations that Sennacherib had conquered.
It's like he's making a point about true power, right?
Yeah.
What's real and what's not.
Yeah. He's not just asking for a miracle. He's reaffirming his faith in a God who's in control, who's sovereign over everything, and a God who is the opposite of those fake gods and those empty promises of the Assyrian king.
He's saying, Sennacherib, you may have all your chariots and armies, but it's our God who's really running the show.
Right. A pretty bold statement, especially when you look at the threat hanging over Jerusalem.
And does God answer Hezekiah's prayer?
He does, in a way that's both reassuring and kind of unexpected. He sends the prophet Isaiah to Hezekiah with a message.
Okay, so what's the message? Does God tell Hezekiah to get ready for a fight? Prepare the army.
Not exactly. It's more about reassurance and kind of putting Sennacherib in his place, calling out his arrogance.
So God's basically saying, Sennacherib, you're not as big as you think you are.
Pretty much. You see, Sennacherib had been bragging about all his victories, acting like it was all because of his own strength and brilliance. And God, through Isaiah, says, hold on a minute. You're not as in control as you think you are.
That's a good reminder for us, too. You know those times when we get a little too proud of ourselves, thinking we did it all on our own? We forget sometimes there's a bigger picture.
Exactly. Isaiah's message is all about that, reminding Hezekiah and all of us that even the most powerful empires and people are still under a higher power.
Okay, so God has spoken through Isaiah. Hezekiah's faith is strong. But let's not forget, there's still a huge Assyrian army surrounding Jerusalem.
Yeah.
They're running out of food. Things are getting desperate. What happens next?
This is where we see God's grace and mercy coming in. He gives Hezekiah a sign, a promise that they'll have food during the siege, and a promise that Judah will be restored.
So even in this dire situation, God gives a glimmer of hope.
He does, and it's not just some vague promise. It's super specific. He tells Hezekiah, yeah, you're facing starvation, but you'll have enough. He promises that after the siege, Judah's going to flourish again. They'll plant vineyards, eat the fruit, put down roots.
Wow, it's like a picture of renewal and resilience.
Yeah.
Even though destruction is staring them in the face, God's painting a picture of life and abundance. So powerful.
And imagine the impact of this message on the people trapped inside Jerusalem.
Right.
Things are bleak, but God's saying, don't give up. There's a bigger plan. You're going to get through this.
It's a reason to keep hoping, even when it seems like there's nothing left to hope for. But they're still outnumbered, outgunned, right? How does this actually end?
Well, this is where things get really dramatic. Maybe even hard to believe. During the night, the angel of the Lord strikes down 185,000 Assyrian soldiers.
185,000. Just like that.
Just like that. It's one of those moments where God shows up in a way that blows our minds. No human logic or strategy could explain it. The Assyrians wake up to total devastation.
I bet Sennacherib's ego took a hit that day. What was his reaction?
He was completely crushed. This wasn't just a setback, it was a total disaster caused by something he couldn't even understand. He had no choice but to retreat back to Assyria with what was left of his army.
So that's it for Sennacherib, defeated and humiliated.
Actually, there's a twist. He goes back to Assyria, and while he's worshiping in the temple of his god Nisroch...
Hold on, while he's worshiping.
Yeah, his own sons assassinate him, right there in the temple. What a crazy twist of fate.
That's some serious irony. The king who mocked the God of Israel, who put all his trust in his own power, ends up killed by his own family while worshiping a fake god.
It really makes you think about the nature of power, doesn't it? Worldly power is fleeting. True strength comes from somewhere else.
This story is wild. It makes you think about what you rely on when things get tough, where you place your trust.
It definitely does, and it makes me wonder, are we so busy building our own little kingdoms, relying on our own strength, that we forget about that power that's bigger than us?
And speaking of things we might be holding on to, what about that bronze serpent? It seems like a random detail, but why do you think it's in this story?
That's a good question. I think that's where this ancient story connects with us today. Hezekiah realized that the bronze serpent, once a symbol of healing, had become something else completely. It was like people were worshiping it instead of God. It was distracting them from real faith.
So it's like a reminder to check our own lives. What are we holding on to that might actually be holding us back spiritually?
That's it. It could be anything, right? Maybe it's stuff or needing everyone to like us or beliefs that don't work anymore.
It's like we need to be honest with ourselves and let go of those things that they're keeping us from really experiencing God's power and love.
Exactly. Sometimes to really grow, we got to tear down the idols we've built, even if they seemed helpful at one time.
For me, it's easy to get caught up in like the drama of this story, the battles, the angel, the whole thing. But what really sticks with me is Hezekiah's faith, even when it seemed like all hope was lost.
Yeah, that's the core of it, isn't it? It's not just about a king versus an army. It's about holding on to faith when you're facing the impossible.
He could have given up, right? Give it into fear, surrendered, but he didn't. He chose to trust in something bigger than himself, bigger than the crisis of the moment.
And that's a choice we all got to make. We've all got our own Assyrians, right? Those things that make us feel helpless.
Yeah. Sometimes it's health, money, relationships. Whatever it is, it can feel like this huge weight bearing down on us.
It can be paralyzing. But Hezekiah reminds us that even when it's dark, there's strength we can find, strength beyond ourselves.
So it's not about ignoring what's happening. It's about where we put our trust.
Right. It's about knowing that even when we're weak, even when we can't see a way out, we're not alone. There's a power that can get us through.
This makes me think about that sign God gave Hezekiah. The food during the siege, the promise of Judah being restored. It was about more than just surviving, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. It was hope. It was God reminding Hezekiah and the people that even in the middle of suffering, there's a bigger picture.
That belief in a future beyond the mess we're in, that's what keeps us going, keeps us fighting, believing things can get better.
And it's not a hope that just sits there. It pushes us to act, to do what we can, even against all odds.
So faith, but also courage and action, right?
All of it together. It's about trusting in God, but also stepping out in faith, doing our part. Hezekiah didn't just pray, he fortified the city too.
He didn't just wait for a miracle. He prepared. He took action.
That's a big part of it too. Faith isn't passive. It's about working with God, even when we don't get what he's doing, why things are happening like they are.
So we've gone deep into this story, but I think there's a challenge here for us. It's not just a cool story from the past. It's about putting these ideas into practice in our own lives.
It's about asking, okay, when I hit my own Assyrians, where do I put my trust? What are my bronze serpents I got to get rid of?
And having that courage to step out in faith, knowing we're not alone, that there's something bigger with us, guiding us, helping us, leading us to that future where things are good again.
Well said. That's the heart of it, I think. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a pleasure to explore this with you.
Absolutely. And until next time, keep digging, keep asking those tough questions, and keep searching for truth.